Hey, it's Anders here coming to you live from Grand Rapids, Michigan at the Baking Steel Studio. Today, we are making artisan bread. I can see I've got a loaf here. I'm gonna put it back in the oven. It's not quite done yet, but it's close. How I can tell, it's still a little heavy, right? Got a little, it's not exactly hollow at the bottom yet. It's getting there. I'm gonna throw it back in the oven, but I wanted to give you a glimpse of what we are doing. A nice artisan loaf. It's gorgeous. And it's going to be incredibly tasty. It's a 24-hour ordeal, super simple to make. We're going to go through the entire process of making the dough, shaping it, baking it, scoring it, fermenting it, etc. All of the above today in class. It's going to be insane and fun. And take notes. And if this is your first time making bread, do not be intimidated. You can do it. If I can do this, you can do this. It's not difficult. The results will speak for themselves. It's so delicious. I'm going to bake this for about 10 more minutes. Just, it's about a 35-minute bake-ish, 40-minute bake. I'm going to finish that one off. And then we're going to, let's go right into making dough. And if you've been to class before, I want to just emphasize, throw your questions, don't be shy, in the box here, and we will get to all of them. If I skip it, please retype it in. It means my eyes are terrible. I might have just missed it, but we'll get it. We're here for you today. This is your class to master bread. Make it great. It's so fun. Let's get right into it. We're going to start with the dough. Then we're going to get into shaping and then scoring, and we'll talk about fermentation and all of the above. It's really simple. And I mean that. What we do really well is we source really nice ingredients and we use really nice equipment because we essentially have, with our steel in the oven, essentially have a bakery at home, which is incredible. So, really. So let's get right into making the dough. Baking steel container here. We're going to use, this is almost identical to our pizza recipe. We're going to reduce the water content slightly, but it's bread flour. This is 500 grams of bread flour. If you're new to us, we always use our digital scale to measure all of our ingredients because this recipe was designed for precise measurements, precise water to flour ratio. We need to dial those in. So I put my scale on. And there's a tare button on it, T-A-R-E. I hit that. That essentially zeroes it out. So right now it thinks I have nothing on the scale. So as I add things, it'll help me dial in the exact ingredients. So I've got pre-measured 500 grams of flour here. And next I'm going to take my 15 grams of sea salt. I like the big crystals too. These are finer, but I like the crystals. This is a red salt, Redmond sea salt. Outstanding. I'll put my scale down because I've already pre-measured everything. And I just literally whisk my salt in. On a skill level, this is about a 2. So all of us are capable of doing that, even me. Right? So whisk it around. Take my yeast, the Fleshman's dry yeast, and backing up to the salt. This is my salt, Redmond Ancient Fine Sea Salt. We have 15 grams here. I have 1 gram of Fleshman's active dry yeast, pre-measured here, dump it in, and whisk away. And now all I'm going to do is take my water, which is filtered, right? This is about 340 grams, 335 of water. So it's a little bit less than our pizza dough, but it's filtered, pour it in. And now take my spatula and just mix. If you've seen this before, I want to show you how simple it is. I like this dough container because it keeps all my mess contained inside the container. You can mix this by machine, by mixer too. I just like to do it by hand for now. I mean, I have a mixer here too, so I do both. But this is so simple and it's a small batch. And once I get the water in there, I'm going to kind of scrape off. And again, I said this again last week, but as we're making anything with dough or something wet, you want to keep one hand dry and the one hand we can go right in. And that's so if I need to grab something, I still have my hand available to grab a phone call, to grab an ingredient, play a game, whatever it might be, right? Just make one hand messy. That's just an old culinary trick. You'll see all chefs do that in kitchens. They'll never get both, well, I shouldn't say never, but they'll seldom get both hands all messy. And then I just kind of press this out. I want to combine all the ingredients to form one large mass of dough. And I do this for about 2 or 3 minutes. I scrape my bowl, get all the edges off. Just keep doing this. You can see the flour and the water starting to hydrate. And what that means, I can feel it starting to get a little bit more moist and wet, and it gets a little bit sticky. And that's how I know, it's like I know it's pretty much done. And this is enough to make, by the way, about 1 loaf of bread. So if I want to make 2, I would just double the ingredients. Let's set this aside. We're gonna cover this up. I would typically remove this and scrape this bowl clean before I put the dough back inside. But to take a little bit of a shortcut, I'm gonna remove put this aside for now over here, right? And I can see I've got one hand almost clean, a little bit on my fingertips. One hand dirty, one hand clean, so I can grab stuff. I didn't do a great job there. Probably give myself a C for a grade, right? Just gonna rinse my hands off really quick. And answer some questions on that, because we're gonna have a couple of different steps and variations today. And I just wanted to see if there's any questions yet on the mixing. Great question. So Diane's asking, what digital scale would I recommend? So I have a brand called My Way, and you can get these on Amazon, I think on the myway.com. I've had this scale for, gosh, 10 years. It's awesome. I replace the batteries once in a while. It's a really nice, durable scale. I can get it wet and messy. It's protected. It's easy to clean. Like this lid will come off in here, and I can just clean the top here. Also, it's got some plastic here covering the numerals and the buttons. So if it does get wet, it does not get inside the machine. So it's waterproof, if you will. That's M. And you can find these on Amazon, MWIGH. That's the brand name, My Way. And they have different variations of that as well, but it's awesome. You'll love it. And then, let's see, how much salt? So I use 15 grams of sea salt. Again, my brand is a Redmond real salt. It's got, if they say it's an ancient fine sea salt, unrefined mineral, got great taste. Put a little bit in my water in the morning. It's really nice. It's got a nice flavor to it. It's awesome. So I use it on my doughs, or I use Celtic as well. Do you vary water volume in summer versus winter? So Sue's asking, do I vary my water summer versus winter? Great question. I do not. I do not alter at all. I keep it the same. I don't think there's a big variance there. I might be wrong, but as far as I know, I keep everything the same. And Brendan's asking, pretty sure he said, yes, 15 grams of sea salt. Debbie, can it be overmixed? By hand, I am not going to overmix my dough. I typically, all I'm really doing is hydrating or combining the flour and the water together. And I put a little pressure on it because I want to take those dry clumps of flour and spread them out so the water absorbs throughout the entire process. In a mixer, I mean, I guess in a mixer, you could really overdo it by mixing it too much and really break it down. So I tend to, even if I'm mixing it, I very, very lightly mix because we're letting it ferment over a long period of time, and we don't want to destroy the gluten strands, if that makes sense. So just a light mix is all you need, and you'll be fine. And where do I find, so we will share this recipe. I'm not even, this is just a made up recipe. We'll post this on the thing. It's really our pizza dough recipe, more or less, but this is the Fleshman Active Dry Yeast. And I buy this in these little jars. They're great because I can keep this in the fridge and it lasts me throughout the year. Just peel off like a gram or two here and there. And man, I still got a bunch left. So it's 1 gram. My Way is the brand. Yes, Kate, we will be posting the recipe for sure. And how long do you have it in? Sit, do you need to cover it? Oh yeah, so I always cover my doughs. If I'm letting it proof, I These containers have a lid, and yes, I do cover them. If you don't have a lid, saran wrap, plastic wrap on top is fine. You do want to keep it covered. Otherwise, it'll develop like a crust on top. And if that does happen, just sprinkle a little bit of water, kind of absorb it back into the dough. It's fine, but we prefer not to have the skin. And when Sue's asking, Sam's asking, you get to Sam first. How long do you have to let it sit, and do you need to cover it? Okay, so I'm going to let this sit like I did this yesterday. This is a 24-hour dough. In fact, we're going to get to the next step in just a minute. I made this dough yesterday. It's been sitting on my counter. I've got a few different batches. I've got one in the oven, one here, and then we're making one today as well. So a few different batches. Francine's asking, can I use instant yeast? You can. The formula is the same. I just do one. I swap it out one for one. All right, let's pull this bread out while because it's done. Oh, looking better, looking great. Look at the color of that, right? Isn't that gorgeous? It's a little bit more hollow. It's super hot. You can see this. It's gorgeous though, right? Underneath, right? Spin it. Super hot. Whew. It's gonna still bake. It's been baking for about 30 minutes, I'd say. I'm gonna bake it for like maybe just a couple more minutes, and then we'll be done. And then it'll be done. Bring it home, melt some butter, or just keep butter and just plaster it with butter later on. It's gonna be incredible. So let's go. Can I use the instant yeast rather than active yeast or a jar of instant? Yeah, I would just, Bert, I would swap out the yeast for each other. That's fine. I think there's a little slightly different ratio, but for what we're doing in class here, the 1 gram is adequate for sure. Yeah, it's got a nice little ear to it too. And then Steven's asking, how would I adjust this if I wanted to use whole wheat? I would substitute whole wheat in, but in increments. I would substitute in, if I'm using 500 grams of bread flour, I would substitute in 20% of that for whole wheat. So it would be 400 grams of bread flour and 100 grams of whole wheat. And that's my recipe. And that's gonna have a more wheaty taste to it. If I do too much wheat, like 50%, it's gonna absorb the water differently. And I have not experimented with that recipe. And it's gonna alter the density and the air pockets, etc. Because wheat flour does absorb the water differently than the recipe we designed here using bread flour. So again, just incrementally add some in. I tend to max out at 20%. For spelt, I might do 5% or 10%. Again, I've had some experience knowing I usually will jump in like 5 or 10, like 25 to 50 grams of the specialty flour into the recipe and then taste it and see how I like it. Maybe next time I'll increment that a little bit higher, etc. I hope that makes sense. So we made our dough. I'm literally going to let this sit at room temperature for the next 24 hours. Alternatively, I could also place this in the refrigerator overnight or for 1 or 2 days and just let it sit there. It's going to cold ferment it, going to slow it down just a little bit. It's still going to be amazing. But if I want to do a longer ferment in the fridge, you could also just try it out. You could do a combination of room temperature, get it started for 24 hours, 12 hours, and then before you go to bed, throw it in the fridge. So there's different variations of this that we can try. But for today, I'm just doing a 24-hour room temperature. And then after the next day, we just made 1 loaf. So I'm going to remove this now. I've got one sitting here for 24 hours. We're going to take a look at it and see how we shape the dough. So let me get a top down here. I'm just going to pull out of my dough container so you can see it here. Look at this, right? I got a big chunk of dough here. This is the entire batch we just made. And I'll lightly flour it just so it doesn't stick to the countertop, right? And I could use even a little semolina flour if I'd like, right? Just lightly. And now what I'm going to do is shape this. So because we're making 1 loaf of bread, I'm gonna make it like a big pizza ball. And there's a couple of different ways of doing this. I could pick it up and like make it like a pizza ball, just like, let me get this camera a little better here. It would be better if I went top down. Let me see. I'm just gonna do it here first. So I'm just kind of pressing in and closing it up. So I can kind of just fold it over itself at the corners, right? There's no right or wrong way of doing this. I'm just kind of making a ball, making it a little bit more taut, right? Just making it nice and tight, adding some tension to it, right? So when it does its final proof, it'll try to expand. But we're gonna try to trap everything inside. You can also just pick this up and make it like a ball. You can see how tight this is getting. I'm just pressing it together. All right, how's this? Let me see. I think my camera went crazy on me. All right, so anyway, I'm adding tension, right? See how smooth this is? And then I'll take this seam side. I'll do that for like maybe, right? A bunch of and I'll just take the seam and like pinch it closed. And I've got this really nice like boule, right? Nice way to do it. Just pinch it. Pinch it. Okay. Now, what do I do with this thing? Let's look at some options. I could grab I'll give you guys some options here. I might actually pull this bread out of here too. All right, so I got options here. I got my bread. Everyone's got a bowl at home. We're gonna do our final proof in the bowl itself. Or we can use these bread baskets. These are all, you can find these on Amazon. These are nice. They come with like a linen cover sometimes. I remove that because I like to have these lines form in the bread. If I don't have a bowl, I mean, I can get these on Amazon. If I don't have these, alternatively, I can use a bowl. I can also use like a wooden bowl, right? Can use a lot of variations here. And what I like to do is, actually, I'll show you what I did here. I'm gonna put this one in the basket. I'm gonna sprinkle a little bit of flour, semolina flour, a little bit of flour in the basket, and place this in the bowl. The seam side, I'm gonna place up, just drop it in, right? And now I'll cover this, the towel or saran wrap, and let this proof for like 3 or 4 hours, even 2 or 3 hours, okay? Just let it proof in here, and it's gonna start to rise, and I'll show you what we'll have. I put one in a bowl earlier, and I've got a bread that's sitting in here, you can see, right? And we're gonna bake this one off, but what I did with this bowl, I put a linen inside, a towel. I sprinkled it with flour just so it would be easy to remove. In fact, I could remove it, you can see with my hand, just plop it down. And that's my bread. Let's grab a peel. Here's my peel. I'm gonna try to go top down. I just take my bowl, invert it onto my pizza peel, right? And there it is. Got this nice round, right? I've got flour, I can see. And now I want to score it. This is a nice time. I like a serrated knife. You can see this. It's got a nice edge. They also have what they call a lame. I don't even have mine's, I think, at my storage somewhere. Serrated knife really will cut through the knife. And you see some really fancy bread makers putting their own signature on it. And we do this just to help this breathe. It creates like an ear. Someone had mentioned that earlier, just to help the steam escape. And you don't even have to score it. I like some people score it. It's like a signature, if you will. And that last one, I just kind of did a seam like this. I could do it. This one, I'm just going to go right across. I go deep at an angle. Boom, boom, and boom. Right? You see those little scores. I've got a little flour on top. It's gorgeous, loose, right? And now I'm going to bake it. I'm going to show you what I do when I put this in the oven. I have my baking steel on. Let me go back to here for a second. I have my baking steel preheating. Actually, it's been in the oven, right? So it's been baking for like the last hour or two. Not pretty. It's gorgeous, guys. It's a nice. Smells incredible. Oh, yeah, I love that scent. This one will look similar, but I scored it differently, right? So it's gonna be a little different, a different approach. Still gonna be amazing. I'm gonna take you guys for a trip into my oven here. I'm gonna show you how I create a little bit of steam inside my oven. My steel's been preheating. I actually have a Silipat on my baking steel. I use it for the last loaf. I'm gonna launch this one right onto the Silipat. It just helps it. It's easier to remove sometimes. You'll see what I have it in there. I'm gonna grab. There's different variations of baking these to add steam. There's a lot of different ways of doing it. I'm gonna show you one that I use right now. So let's go into the oven. I reduce it as the bread's in the oven. Here's my bread. I have my ice cubes, right? So let me grab my towel. So all I do, see my Silipat inside. You see what I'm doing here? And I can take my loaf. In fact, I'm gonna clean this off. And I just shimmy this off just like this, right? And now I can take a couple of ice cubes. Just put them on my steel. You can see I'm creating a little bit of steam inside. You guys see what I'm doing? A little bit of steam, close her up. And put my timer on for about 15 minutes. Set. We're gonna bake that for about 15 minutes. I'll open up the oven. I might rotate it a little bit, and from there add another 15 to 20 minutes and continue to bake until it's done. I might reduce the heat to 425 so I get this, like I can knock this thing, get a nice hollow sound. This probably could use another minute or two. Could feel it, maybe a couple more minutes, but it's gonna be awesome. It's bread. It's gorgeous, right? Super simple. That's our bread, guys. It's that easy. So good. I don't want to slice it open yet. I want to continue. It's going to continue to cook for a few minutes. I'll put a picture up on the YouTube video when we finish it, so you can see what it looks like. Let's get to some more questions from you guys. All right. Why do you have, okay. Let me go back up a little bit here. Sorry. How do you adjust the whole, okay. Hi, Elaine, welcome. I have a leather granite countertop. Ooh, that's interesting. Should I use a wooden baker's board or could I use the counter, specifically thinking about temperature? Debbie, are you talking about when you're mixing your doughs? You can mix it right on the countertop. That'll be awesome. It'll be fine, for sure. Let's see. Kevin's asking, if you let the dough out for 24 hours already, what is the proofing doing to the dough? I thought proofing from the refrigerator was to get the dough warmed up to room temperature. Great question. So if there's the final proof, we call it, right? So I just balled this dough up here. So what happens is I've trapped in, something's going on with the glutens inside of the bread. I trapped everything inside. And this dough needs now to relax, to create the air pockets in the gas, needs to expand. And I made it really, really taut. So we trapped everything inside. The final proof is gonna take about 3 hours to let this thing chill out, very similar to pizza dough. And I guess that's probably a good comparison. If I just made my pizza dough balls, that dough is not gonna stretch. And by allowing it now to rest for 3 hours, we're able to stretch it. And there's some bread bakers that go right from cold into the oven as well, but we're gonna let this thing relax a little bit and expand, and then we will bake it off. I hope that explains that. Really not to do a temperature when you're baking at room temperature, when you're fermenting at room temperature, it's more just allowing those glutens to expand and chill out, if you will. That's probably a bad term. Yes, Stephen, parchment paper is a great idea. In fact, a lot of bread bakers use parchment. I have a Silipat here. Those are awesome too, just more permanent. but parchment paper works great. Just again, if I'm using parchment, just be mind, bread is great. Pizza, also great, but just do not use the broiler. Show me the mineral oil that you use. Diane, I don't even have any here. You can find it on Amazon. Just look up, wood oils, and you'll find a mineral oil. That'll be fine. I don't think I have any here. Just double check. I do not have any. To be honest, I haven't even oiled my peels here in a few months, but they're fine. I keep a close eye on them. What temp? I'm baking this at 450 for the first 20 minutes, and then I'm going to reduce it to like 400 or 425. I don't want to get too dark. You can see it's a good color. I love this color. All right, so I reduce the temperature as it bakes. It takes about 35, 40 minutes, depending on the size. What do you have on top of the steel? Diane, I've got 2 steels in my oven. You guys want to take a peek? Show you my setup. Inside, oh, you can see through the glass. I don't want to open the oven up. I've got 2 steels, one on top and one on the bottom. That's my typical setup for pizzas and breads. If I'm making bread, I use the bottom steel. If I'm making pizza, I use the top steel. If I'm making multiple pizzas, I use both steels. I start on top and finish on the bottom, if that makes sense. That's my typical setup. Let's see. And then, do you ever spray the loaf with water? Yes, Francine, great question. Alternatively, you can use a spray bottle. Great idea. In fact, I just don't have a spray bottle here. I think it's in my other room over there in a box, because I haven't used it much, but there's variations of ways to get steam. Another way to get steam is in fact, we're going to make one of these for you guys for breads, but you can take like an aluminum mixing bowl. When I launch, I place the aluminum bowl directly on top of my steel. And now I'm trapping in, I might even throw an ice cube in here with it. Now I'm trapping in steam. It's basically like a Dutch oven hack. I've created its own Dutch oven using this aluminum bowl. And after about 15 minutes, I'll remove the bowl for the first half of the bake, and now let the crust create a crust by letting the steam escape. So it's very similar to Dutch oven baking. We just kind of do an inverted version of that, where we use the bowl on top. We kind of create our own Dutch oven. And I hope that answers that. I noticed that you put all the ingredients into the mix in the beginning of dough making. Do you ever hold back the salt for a while and mix in? Yeah, that's a great question, Mark. So, I remember I had a culinary instructor who's a master baker, and he would probably notice salt being added at the end of the bread mix, because I think the pros like to add the salt at the end. I don't know particularly why. I forget the reasons why. However, I have tried it both ways, and I can't for the life of me figure out the difference. I can't tell the difference, so I just mix it all in the beginning. The only other thing I might do with if I'm making large batches of doughs, and when I made a lot of pizza dough, a lot of times I would dissolve my salt in the water first. Oven up the temperature. I would dissolve my salt in the water first, and then add my flour. That's something I would do from time to time. But other than that, I do not add the salt last. I know some bakers do and swear by it. I cannot taste the difference or feel the difference or notice any difference in my baking when I don't. Yes, John, yes, they can. I was trying to prevent a big mess. I didn't do a good job. The Silipats, like I would use the Silipat for like in replacement of parchment paper, right? So, and typically I'll keep the mess more contained. I can just launch the Silipat onto the steel or parchment paper. But if you don't want to use the Silipat or parchment paper, you can go right to the steel. There are some breads that you can see the bottom is getting dark, not too dark, it's fine. We do make baking steel bracelets. And the value in these, one, they're cool to wear on your wrists. I always have them on. But two, I might put these on my steel for the last half of the bake. They'll elevate the bread. So the bread now will not burn on the bottom or get too dark. I'm still getting airflow. It's still baking, but the bracelets kind of add a little buffer between the steel and the bread, just to prevent it from getting too dark. I always have them on my wrist in case that does happen. It's like a cooling rack, right? But on the steel when it's baking. That's what's great about the bracelets. Excuse me. Whew. All right. What else we got here? Can you herbs in place of the cuts of? Oh yeah, great call, Janet. Yes, why not? If you want to herb the bread up, go for it. Your world, your design. You could do it two ways. You could put them in the ear. You could throw them in the dough itself and mix it, if you will, right? You could do it both ways. So both gonna be great. Which bread recipe are you using? So I'm going to share this on the email. This is literally our pizza dough. I reduced the hydration just a little bit to make it a little bit more dense. So it's like 67% hydrated, 65 to 67. I don't, well, let's find out exactly. How would I do that? I would take my calculator. So 70% is our pizza dough recipe, right? That means there's 70% water in the flour, which is 350 grams divided by 500. To make it like 65%, I would just take my calculator times 65%, and I would add 325 grams of water into my batch. And that's going to make it a little bit more like a New York style, a little bit more dense bread. Like think bagels is even less than that. Figure that, like really dense bread. So I'm just reducing it. It's like an intuitive thing. Made breads a lot. We'll share the recipe in the email. But for this one, it's 500 grams of flour, 325 grams of water, 15 grams of sea salt, 1 gram of active dry yeast. That's your recipe. Mix and sift. Total bake time, can convection be used? Great question, Deborah. Yes, I should say, when I'm baking, I'm always using convection. If I'm cooking anything, I'm always using convection. All that is a fan in the back of my oven that blows air around. It makes a nice even bake. So you have a convection and a baking steel in your home oven. It's rock star. It's going to make everything better. It's going to cook more evenly. With that said, I still rotate my foods. I still take my bread and I rotate it this way, right? And I switch it around. You see one side, pretty close. One side might be a little darker, but pretty even bake there. It's great. Oh, so by leathered granite, it's a process, so it isn't shiny or slick. I assume that is still fine. Well, oh yeah, that's fine. So it's like more of like a dull finish. I get it. Yeah, that'll be fine. If it spreads out or splats after putting bread, is that not enough tension in shaping? Good question. So Karen, yes, if my dough, could see like this is the loaf pan I'm using here. She said if I put it in a pan, like all of a sudden just kind of flattens itself out. Yeah, it's probably a sign that I don't have enough tension. And that's, with experience, you'll know you can do some more folds in that to create some more tension. You saw me balling this up earlier. You could do more of that. If you felt like, especially a higher hydration, or a weaker flour, you might see that starting to spill on you. Just be more mindful of the tension. And if you feel like it's loose, it probably is. Trust your intuition and just create some more folds in there to tighten it up. Do you have to use parchment paper or silicone? And why not? Yeah, no, you do not. Diane, not at all. I just did it because I like Silipats. I did it because I was trying to contain my mess on my steel. It makes for cleanup a lot easier. I think I was pretty successful. I left most of that flour and semolina on the Silipat. Silipat's just another piece of parchment paper for me. I like Silipat because I can reuse them. Yeah, so Michael, good question. They say salt kills the yeast. When we mixed our initial ingredients, if you saw, I did salt and then I whisked it in. And then I took my yeast and I whisked it in separately. Now, that's a really good point. If I put my salt and yeast together, like if I put, and I mixed them together in here and then put this in my mixture, that salt could come directly in contact with that yeast and kill it. I have seen that before. I have done it before. So that's why I always whisk my ingredients separately. Great point. Yes, exactly, Bert. Where can you get the Silipat from? Do you think, Debbie, for the correct name and spelling? Oh yeah, thank you, Debbie. Silipat, Silipat. They're awesome. You can find them on Amazon. I think on the Silipat site. They're just really, they're nice because they're reusable. At least I have one here. You can see. Oh, actually, I have a big one. Here's a big one. But this one's big. This one's for like, a lot of people will use these on their counters for like mixing their doughs and kneading them. Again, containing everything right here. And you can see they're massive. They're made in France. They're awesome. I love them. Might have our own with those guys soon. Let's see. Are you using convection or regular bake? So Eric's asking, I'm using convection. I use convection for every single thing I bake in my oven. It's automatic for me. And that's just again, it doesn't, there's a formula. I know these recipes sometimes saying if you're using convection, reduce the heat. I keep everything the same. Just keep the convection on. For pizza and breads, we're going high heat anyway, 450, 500. We like that convection, that nice even heat. What's the difference between this loaf and a baguette? Great question. Very similar. We might change, I think our baguette recipe, we might use a blend of all-purpose and bread flour. And that's just from experimenting it. The only other difference is, I'm gonna reduce this heat. 400. And I'll take you guys in the oven if you guys want to see what's going on in there. When we do baguettes, if you remember, we should do them again soon, but we do a lot of folds with the baguettes. And what we're doing there is creating tension. So this bread doesn't flare out when we're baking it. We're really making a really, really tight cylinder of the bread. So by doing a lot of fold, we do like 3 folds over an hour and a half of time. And what that does is it creates like the baguette shape, but it'll help it stay in that shape when it's baking. If we didn't do that, we just took our dough and baked it in like a cylinder, you would see it, and I've done this, you'd see it like expand in like really weird places. It'd be very amoeba looking. So the baguette, by doing the folds, really helps contain it and layer in the shape so it stays in that nice cylinder form. Oh yeah, so John, this recipe is close to your rustic bread loaf, but you did not use lava rocks or bracelets, little less, exactly. And as you can see, but you know, bread, pizza doughs, they're all so similar. We make little tweaks here and there. For the steam, there's so many ways of capturing steam inside your oven. I like the reverse Dutch oven hack, that's great. Sometimes I just throw ice cubes in there if I'm in a rush, in a pinch. I don't even have my lava rocks here. They're still in a box in storage. I haven't used them. There's a lot of variations, but to be honest, like this is awesome. Like this bread is as good as you'll get anywhere, right? I love it. It tastes great. It's got nice, I mean, you saw how I created the steam, a couple of ice cubes. And it's awesome. Again, there's just different ways of doing it. And that's one, I'm trying to keep it really simple for us. Ice cubes, bread of 101, I think is more than adequate for everybody. Let's see. Could I only use 1 baking steel to bake my bread? What is the difference between baking with 1 versus 2 baking steels? Maria, great question. I only use 1 steel here today. For breads, typically that's all I'm ever going to use. Unless I'm making multiple loaves, which in my case, I don't really make multiple loaves often. If I'm doing ciabatta breads, I might use 2 steels, but very, very little, seldom do I going to do that. I'm just using 1. In fact, I'm gonna take a quick pause and take you guys inside the oven again. My camera's clean. You guys can see what's going on with that other bread we made together today. Hey, look at this. Really starting to expand nice. Isn't that gorgeous? You can see the way I did those, the lame on top, right? It's a little bit different than this one, the ear. It's a little bit different. So it's like a variation of like your signature on top, right? So again, they're all cool, they're all different, all fun to do. What adjustments for high altitude baking? Laurie, great question. And I don't make any adjustments. I don't bake in high altitudes, but I have talked to some folks that do, and there's very little, if any, variations that I've noticed that I could share with you, that I've noticed or heard. Mark, this is a 24-hour fermentation. Is there any advantage or disadvantage to using a Dutch oven? Barb, great question. Dutch oven baking is epic because it traps the steam inside. So you carry the downside of that is you got to carry this a Dutch oven in and out of your oven, which gets hot and it's dangerous, right? However, so what we've done is we've created our own. You can get aluminum mixing bowls like this at home and just plop it on your steel upside down. And now you've got your own Dutch oven on your baking steel. And you can use this as a bowl as well. It just makes it a lot simpler. That's just be careful when you're removing this because it doesn't have a handle on it, and that steam will come out and get you. So I noticed that from experience. So I usually stick a knife or something underneath it, flip it over, and then take it out. Let the steam escape, and boom, you're good. So I prefer the, but then again, there's some micro bakers out there that are doing open baking, and they're creating their own steam inside the oven with lava rocks, like spray, right? Spray balls, ice cubes. There's different ways to create. And if you're doing multiple loaves, you don't want to be using multiple Dutch ovens. So we can create a really nice crust without the Dutch oven. So open baking is the way to go. Hi, Stephen. I think this will be going out, my pleasure. In the next couple of days, I think either Friday or Monday. I should know that. Ooh, great question. So Terry, I use my Silipat underneath my cutting board so it doesn't slide around. Great idea. I love to make herb olive oil dip for that kind of bread. Ooh, Elaine, that sounds amazing. And I also like to have like butter at room temperature and just smear it on there. So good. Do you leave your steel in the oven all the time? And do you take it out when you're not using bread or pizza? Debbie, great question. I leave my steel in the oven full time. The only time they come out is to clean. And I clean mine, usually the next day after it's cooled down. I keep them in the oven because I bake everything on there. So if I'm making roasted vegetables, I will place my sheet tray directly on top of my steel. If I'm baking pies, I'll take my pie plate and put it right on my steel. You're gonna get the benefit of the even heat underneath from the steel into whatever you're baking. So we call it like a battery inside your oven. It will bake everything better and more evenly and faster by keeping it in the oven. Have you ever sprayed fine mist water on a loaf just before placing it in the oven? I've seen this done, but don't know why. Yep, William, great question. And I may have answered that earlier, but yes, the mist creates like a steam on the bread, on the crust. And I've seen a lot of bakers, I've done this myself, just spray, when you launch it in, just spray it. It'll create some steam. It'll get some moisture on the crust, which will make it a better crust. That makes sense. This Silpat, you're right. I'd actually say Silipat, it's Silpat. S-I-L-P-A-T, Silpat. Is it Silipat? Now I'm curious. I'm gonna look that up. Can someone look that up for me? Silpat. Can someone look that up? My battery's like, here we go. Any difference between using, oh, great question. So Yvonne, any difference when I'm using a gas oven? Not for breads, not at all. In fact, the only, I bake both in a gas oven and electric. The only difference I find is not for breads, but for pizzas. I like the gas oven broiler a little bit better because it goes on instantaneously. Other than that, pretty similar. However, if you have a gas oven and you're leaving your steel inside, I do recommend getting some extra layers of seasoning on because there is some moisture in a gas oven. Each time you fire it up, just from the gas, there's some moisture coming in. So you do want to protect that steel a little bit better. So if you really don't want to set it, forget it. If you're going to leave your steel in, be sure to add some layers of seasoning and just keep your eye on it. It's gonna, again, it'll last a long, long time. Just need to be mindful of keeping that steel clean and well seasoned. It's Silpat. Thank you. Thank you. I love it. Laurie, I have an Emil Henry bread making oven, aka akin to a Dutch oven. It works really well for baking, although pricey. Yeah, those are great. Dutch ovens are really nice to make one loaf. And again, we're just using what we have in the kitchen, taking a bowl, inverting it. You have your own Dutch oven with the baking steel, which is even better. But Dutch ovens, yeah, they're heavy, right? They've got steel underneath them. They're made of steel. I assume you only put a cookie tray, for example, on the steel, not the ceramic casserole dish. Great question, Debbie. I actually do use Pyrex glass plates right on my steel. We're not getting I might not go really like a really cold pie plate onto, but a room temperature, not a huge variation. Baking on your hot steel is fine because we're not getting the oven hotter than the temperature we're selecting. It's just more even heat than the temperature we've selected. So I'm baking pies and cookies at 350 with my steel inside. The oven's not going to be hotter than 350, so I can place my tray, my ceramic directly on top. As long as it's oven safe, it's fine. Hope that answers that. Are there any more questions, you guys? What a great crew today. Amazing. You are great, Debbie. Thank you. Awesome. And honestly, you guys are amazing. I'm so grateful for everybody here. I also want to give something away today. I'm gonna give away a baking steel today to somebody. I'm gonna pick them randomly because I like doing this. Anybody who's here, I'm just gonna scroll, select the name, and then you're gonna win a baking steel of your choice. I hope I pick whoever's thinking about it, right? Brendan O'Halloran. Brendan, are you still here? I hope so. If you're here, you're going to win a baking steel. Can you just give me a verification that you're still here, Brendan? Yes, I love it. So here, I'm going to give you my email. Baking steel. Anders@bakingsteel.com. Give me an email and we'll connect and we'll get you hooked up with the good stuff. Something heavy. You guys totally rock. Amazing. Thank you for being here again. My pleasure doing these classes. We'll be back I think in February with a couple of more classes. We're gonna have some guests this year doing more giveaways. Anything special you guys want to see in class, please email me. We'll take care of you. It's gonna be amazing. Breads, pizzas, anything else that you recommend. I think we have English muffins on the docket for February too, which are really legendary. If you haven't tried those yet, they're so fun to make. You guys are great. I really appreciate you being here. We're going to record this, get it back up so you guys can review it. If you have any questions, email me. Grateful for all of you. Happy and safe days ahead. Thanks. Bye.